It's 1 a.m. in New York, 6 in London, and 2 on a Thursday afternoon here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. We continue our special coverage of the ferry sinking off Korea's southwestern coast. The major rescue operation continues on this Thursday afternoon, more than 24 hours after a Korean passenger ferry carrying 475 people capsized. Now, 9 people have so far been confirmed dead, while 287 others remain unaccounted for. Now, most on board the Sewol ferry were teenagers, high school students heading to Korea's southern Jeju Island for a field trip. Let's go straight to our Connie Kim. She is standing by at an emergency management center that's been set up to deal with this tragic incident here in Korea. Connie, so what do you know so far?
Yes, unfortunately, there are no news over the number of survivors. However, the confirmed death toll currently stands at 9, 5 of them being high school students. Now, the Ministry of Security and Public Administration has confirmed that 5 passengers were on board. 2 Filipinos, both in their 40s, are confirmed to have been rescued. The whereabouts about the three other foreign passengers are unknown, including an 18-year-old Russian student and 2 Chinese nationals of Korean descent in their 30s. According to a press briefing led by the securities minister this morning, 179 people have so far been rescued from the ferry. 101 of them are currently being treated in 8 different hospitals, 5 in critical condition. Now, there were conflicting numbers yesterday about the total number of people on board when the ship went down. The number now stands at 475.
Well, a lot of confusion here, but one thing is for sure, the whole nation wants everyone, of course, to be safe and sound. The search and rescue efforts continue. Now, this is a massive operation. Tell us just how large it is.
Well, according to the securities minister, there are 555 scuba divers on the scene, along with 169 ships and 29 aircraft, all actively searching for survivors. Now, this is a cooperative search being led by the Korean Navy and the Coast Guard, but they are battling difficult conditions. Fast tidal currents and low visibility underwater are hampering efforts. There are 3 cranes currently on their way to Jindo. 1 departed Wednesday night, and all 3 cranes are expected to arrive by tomorrow. They'll work in tandem to lift the 6,800-ton ferry out of the water.
Of course, we're all waiting anxiously for updates from the government. How are government officials helping with the search?
Well, Prime Minister Chung Eun-won held a cabinet meeting this morning calling for all related ministries to do all they can to speed up rescue operations. Now, the Securities Ministry has sent 39 of its officials down to the area to help out in various ways, while the presidential office of Cheongwade canceled all scheduled meetings this morning.
We will, of course, continue to monitor the developments in the search and rescue efforts while continuing to hope for the very best in this very, very difficult time. Our Connie Kim reporting live from the Emergency Disaster Center in Seoul. Let's now go over to our Kim Ji-yeon at the News Center for further details on this incident. Now, Ji-yeon, there's been a lot of talk here in Korea about the series of text messages that have been delivered to family members of victims since the ferry went down, raising hopes of finding survivors. But there's apparently more to that story, isn't there?
Kwon-young, there is. Local authorities have confirmed that some messages sent from the missing were received at around midnight last night, some 15 hours after the ship started sinking. The messages said they were alive, which is raising hopes more survivors will be found. But we must note that there's a strong possibility these messages were sent earlier than that and were just delivered late due to heavy data. With regard to the search efforts, the Coast Guard began pumping oxygen into the hull of the vessel about an hour and a half ago to help increase their chances of finding survivors before they lift the ship off its side. But heavy rain and gusts of wind are hampering the search efforts. Heavy machinery being used for the rescue operation was swaying back and forth due to the winds, and that along with strong ocean currents are dropping temperatures of the waters around 10 degrees Celsius as of this afternoon.
Gia, so the weather conditions are hindering efforts. Now, we still don't know what caused the ship to capsize. There is, of course, speculation that the ferry might have hit a submerged reef or rocks or that it may have made a swift turn for some reason. What do we know about what may have happened?
Well, the Coast Guard say there was an abrupt change in the ship's direction, and this could have caused it to list. Due to this, the 180 vehicles and 1,000 tons of cargo on board to shift to one side, ultimately leading the ship to capsize very quickly. This again is a provisional finding as the investigation into what happened continues. Connie.
Now, what about the crew on the ship? We're hearing that the captain abandoned the ship shortly after the ship started capsizing. Amazing, but is that true?
Well, local authorities continue to investigate all facets of the story. There is a lot of attention on who is responsible for this, as it may offer clues to why and how this catastrophe developed. There are many questions directed toward the Cheonghae Marine Company that owns the ferry. Korea's financial watchdog says the company was having financial difficulties. The ferry's captain, identified as 60-year-old Lee Jun-seok, is also under the microscope. He was questioned this morning by authorities and said he was truly sorry for the passengers and the victims' families. His actions are being called into question as to whether Lee abandoned the ship instead of helping passengers to safety.
Well, certainly there are a lot of questions to be answered, but right now we're simply hoping that search and rescue teams find survivors in what's turned into one of the worst disasters this country has seen in a very long time. Thank you, Jian, for that. The exact cause of this accident is yet unknown, but there's plenty of speculation on how this 6,800-ton ferry, the second biggest of its kind operating in Korea, went under in less than just 2 hours. Let's try getting a better sense of the situation down in Chindo and the terrain the rescue teams are dealing with there in Korea's southwestern coast. For that, Kim Kwang-soo joins us live on the phone. He is a professor at Mokpo National Maritime University's Division of Maritime Transportation Systems. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Kim. Professor, what could have possibly caused this massive ferry to capsize and so quickly as well? I mean, we are hearing that this is quite uncommon.
Yeah, unexpectedly, the ship began to be filled with water and sank in 2 hours. 2 hours are thought to be the very short time in capsizing the passenger ship, probably while the ship was damaged and flooded, and then rested to port side, and the vehicles and cargo containers which were loaded and stored on board the ship were supposed to move to port side rapidly, and the list of the ship to port side may be more increased. After all, the ship was capsized quickly due to the loss of ship's stability. The condition of seawater ballast on board the ship was unknown.
Now, Professor Kim, reports are saying that the passenger vessel did not send out a distress signal, but it was rather the passengers that reported the sinking in the first place. What could have happened at that time inside the ferry?
At this time, it is very hard to say what happened on board the ship. So we just suspect that maybe they cannot reveal the situation to outside. But at this moment, it's very hard to say.
Of course, right. At this moment, anything is hard to, it all is but a speculation. Now, we've heard that these are very difficult conditions that searchers are working in. Give us some perspective on this area, the water conditions and the general terrain.
Weather forecast said that the weather condition is not so good. Maybe some strong wind and clouded and at times rainy weather. Unfortunately, bad weather will make search and rescue operation more difficult. It is most regrettable that there is not much possibility of survival and rescue of missing persons. It is so miserable. Oxygen is in the air is critical to the survival of persons confined on board the ship. Oxygen makes up around 21% of the air we breathe. Content of oxygen below the 7% of the air is reported to endanger human life and lead to the loss of human life. It is suspected and breathing oxygen deficient air can damage the the central nervous system of the human body. Thus, it is impossible for persons to breathe and maintain their lives in the oxygen-deficient areas. The lives of persons confined on board the sinking ship depend on the content of the oxygen in the air trap of the ship sunken. Hypothermia is another important factor to the survival of persons at sea. Body temperature below 33 degrees Celsius is very dangerous to the lives of passengers. The present water temperature is reported to be about 12 Celsius degrees. The person in the water of 12 Celsius degrees is said to survive only for about 2 or 3 hours at the maximum.
Right, so very, very cold temperatures there in the water. Let me ask you something that is being speculated widely by the parents of these students, those with loved ones on this ship. They are talking a great deal about air pockets and the hope that there are air pockets on this vessel which could prove to be critical for the survival of their loved ones. Now, what are the chances of passengers finding air pockets on a vessel like this in this kind of situation?
We are not sure that in the ship, we are not sure whether sufficient air pocket in the ship or any confined area. But we don't know actually what's happening in the ship sunken. Just we are waiting some reports from divers and some survivors.
Definitely. All right. Professor Kim, thank you so much for your time today. We're looking forward to some good news from this truly, truly heartbreaking incident. That was Professor Kim Kwang-soo of Mokpo National Maritime University offering his insights on the Sewol ferry sinking. Now, to give you a quick recap on the current situation, 287 people are still missing, and the number of confirmed dead has risen in the last couple of hours to 9. 179 people were rescued on Wednesday. Now, this after Sewol ferry started to sink sometime around 9 a.m. Wednesday morning local time, Korea time, some 20 kilometers off the coast of Jeju Island in southwestern Korea. At this point, it's speculation and even more speculation. Now, something that's being discussed heavily, however, is that this terrible incident could have been made worse as passengers on board the ill-fated ferry were told numerous times through an onboard announcement to stay put and not attempt to jump into the sea. It was only after an hour that a final announcement was made for everyone to get off, but by then it could have been too late for some. Our Sun Jung-in has more.
It's been reported that when the accident occurred, the onboard announcement to the passengers was to stay where they were without giving any specific directions. The same announcement was known to have been heard repeatedly for 1 hour before they finally told all the passengers to jump into the sea with their life vests on as the ferry was going to sink. Many say the delayed warning to get off the ferry could have caused a bigger tragedy as many passengers heeded instructions and stayed in their rooms and were later unable to escape as the vessel went down.
A female voice informed us of the situation through a speaker. She said the rescue workers would come soon and she told us to stay put.
The Sewol is one of the biggest ferries in Korea and most of the equipment is electric, including the doors and gates inside. Some experts speculate the generator may have gone off when the ferry began to tilt to the left.
It's highly likely the power cut off as the ferry tilted. There could have been a total blackout, meaning doors would not open.
Even if the doors were open, the steep incline of the floors may have made escape much more difficult for people trapped inside.
Many people were screaming as the floors inclined and all the equipment and people slid down.
The worst scenario is that if there are still people trapped in the cabin, there won't be enough air for them to breathe. Everyone is praying with all their hearts that this won't be the case and that all those unaccounted for will be rescued safely. 손정인, ARIRANG News.
Now, to navigate us through this tragic crisis, we are joined live in the studio by Dr. Kim Byung-ju. He is ARIRANG's longtime regular contributor. Dr. Kim, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We just talked about the announcement that was made in the ferry in the beginning hours of this sinking, and they were told to stay put. But and this might have caused the incident to for even more casualties. The speculation is, but is it not? For me, it seems quite reasonable when a disaster happens, you are told to stay put in one area rather than, having people run around the deck or whatnot.
Exactly. Initially, what was being reported was they were saying perhaps captain and the crew might have been telling the passengers to stay put because this is a ship, and if everybody move around all together, like 475 people together move around to one direction or another, they could lose the balance. So that's probably why they were telling the passengers to stay put until they find out the facts of what was happening at that time. That was initial speculation on our side, not knowing the facts. But now a lot of experts seem to be saying that this ship, the largest or second largest domestic ferry that we have in this country, 7,000 ton in terms of its size. Even if 470 or so people run around to one direction, experts are saying it may not lose its overall balance. So now new speculation is that the crew and the captain were not sure about how to handle the emergency situation here. Perhaps without knowing the immediate cause of the problem that they're experiencing, and they were just not good at handling the situation, possibly indicating that they didn't really have a clear SOP, for instance, standard operation procedure in dealing with this kind of emergency. So that's probably what had happened. But as you mentioned, as the situation got serious, this is a huge ship. So if there's a tilting that was occurring, it's very difficult for passengers to climb up the stairways, for instance, the corridors, for instance, if it has a steep angle, unless they have something to hold on or unless you have a strong arm to, like a climb, like using a rope or something like that. It's very difficult to climb up to the safer side from the sinking side. So probably after a certain period of time, after losing certain angles, it might have become just too extremely difficult for rest of the passengers to climb up.
Now, we have gotten some reports on what kind of a ferry this is. Like you mentioned, it's a nearly 7,000-ton ferry, the second largest in Korea, and it's capable of also loading buses, for instance.
Exactly.
Could you give us just an idea of what kind of a ferry this is?
Well, basically, it had, at the last time it was reported about, it had 5 stories. And first, the bottom ones that as far as I understand, is a cargo area where they stored, containers, shipping containers, as well as cars and vehicles and so on. And the rest of the 3 top floors were passenger floors. And the overall, what was happening was that one speculation goes that there's something happened to the bottom 2 stores, either of the one, and then water came in and there was no blocking walls there and just flooding the whole area and letting the ship lose its balance, while the on 3 top floors, passengers were filled inside and they didn't know what to do. So having one open space, 2 stores at the bottom might have actually made the overall situation worsen when the ship was losing its balance.
Well, making this story all the more tragic, of course, is the fact that most of the passengers on board the ferry were high school students on a field trip. So the 475 people on board the Sewol ferry should be on Jeju Island right now, and more than 300 of which were high school students on a field trip. They left from the port city of Incheon on Tuesday night and were nearly 12 hours into their trip when something that we don't know right now, something caused this ship to capsize. Our Shin Se-min walks us through the ferry's journey leading up to that fateful moment.
11 hours and 52 minutes. That is how long the capsized Korean ferry sailed after departing from its port on Tuesday night before it suddenly ran into problems. Its 475 passengers expected to set off at 6:30 p.m. that night, but their departure is delayed 2 hours due to foggy weather skirting near the coastal area.
We were told the thick fog would delay our departure time.
There are no indications of any trouble after the ferry hit open waters. And around 10 p.m. Tuesday, the ship passed by Jeju Island, slipping through the Incheon coastal waters, heading south toward Jeju Island. By dawn, the Sewol ferry passes near waters off Mokpo near Jeollanam-do province. 8:30 in the morning. Excited students wake up to thoughts of their field trip to Jeju. Many either call or text family members about their whereabouts and to tell them they are safe. But 20 minutes later, with just 2 hours to go before the ship is set to arrive at port, the ship comes to an abrupt stop and begins to capsize. The students and others on board would be in Jeju right now, if not for whatever caused the ship to sink. Yet, a majority of them remain missing at this hour, with a massive search and rescue operation underway to find them. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Right, so the rescue efforts will continue as we speak. They are continuing. Now, how likely is it that they will find survivors at this point? It's been 29 and a half hours since the first distress call.
Right. We'd like to hope that there will be as much hope as possible at this point. And altogether, as reported, 555 divers are working on it at this point. But the thing is, time they got each time that one diver goes in, it's about like at most 30 minutes working around the area where it has like a 20 centimeter visibility, and they have to fight against the fast current indeed. So this is a very, very tough process. We're just hoping that, about, was it 2010 when we had the Cheonan incident? Some of these professionals may have accumulated a lot of experience, and that experience could help indeed. The only thing is, a lot of people are saying until we actually lift the ship up, we will not really fully complete the search as a whole. And the lifting process took 17 days in the Cheonan case. And this is a ship that's about 6 times larger than Cheonan's case. So we're just hoping that the overall rescue mission will go ahead as fast as possible. But at this point, the situation over there, the natural condition over there, the fast current and the visibility, they are worse than the case that we have experienced about 4 years ago.
Definitely. Now, another heartbreaking story would be that as rescue efforts continue, text messages from passengers who are on board the sinking ferry have surfaced. A son thinking he might not make it, telling his mother that he loves her, and another student telling his father that he cannot escape because the ship has tilted too much. There are other rescue stories coming to light, including the rescue of a 6-year-old child. Connie Lee has more.
Text messages, apparently from passengers, paint a harrowing picture of what it was like in the moments directly after the ferry started sinking. One trapped passenger texted his father, telling him about a situation. To this, the father responded, "I know help is on the way, but if possible, get outside." To this, the son texts back, "No, Dad, I can't. The ferry is too tilted. There are no kids out in the hallways." Another passenger, this time a son, texted his mother, "Mom, just in case I don't have another chance to say it, I love you." The mother replied, but clearly unaware of his situation. An exchange between two brothers describes what had happened. The passenger texted that the ferry hit something and stopped moving, but reassured his older brother that a rescue team had arrived. The older brother then replied, telling him not to panic, to stay alert and follow directions, but he heard nothing more. Meanwhile, the stories of survivors show their desperate attempts to live, with some passengers breaking through windows and jumping into waters to be rescued.
I just jumped into the water and started swimming. It was really cold, so I tried to swim as fast as I could.
Stories of heroism are also surfacing, including one where 58-year-old Kim Hong-young saved 20 passengers by himself as the ferry was sinking. Kim reportedly tied a fire hose to curtains and pulled nearly 24 students from the first floor of the ship to the outside so that rescue helicopters could reach them. And another story of heroism is a rescue of a 6-year-old child. The young girl named Kwon Ji-yeon was rescued by 4 passengers, as you can see in this video, in the final moments. During the disaster, she was apparently split up from her parents and brother, who are unfortunately still among the hundreds who are still missing. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Well, that's all from us at this hour. And Dr. Kim Byung-ji, thank you so much for your insights this hour. And you will be joining us all throughout the day. And that's all from us for now. Our special coverage on the sunken ferry off Korea's southwestern coast continues all throughout the day. Join me again at the top of the hour.